Again, I'm Matt Kovner. I am now going to bring up our esteemed guests. We have John Bowermaster, filmmaker, producer, director, and we have George Jackman. Some people like to sit, some people don't. George likes to stand up. Dr. George Jackman. George is a retired New York City police lieutenant turned aquatic ecologist. He's an experienced environmental activist and adjunct professor at Queens College and holds a PhD in ecology, evolution, and behavior from the CUNY Graduate Center. He has extensive experience in academic research working with migratory fish. He's currently working on dam removals in the Hudson Valley, especially ones that are considered priority barriers to migratory fish. He conducts planning, outreach, fundraising, communications, and advocacy to promote fish passage and mitigate the damaging effects of barriers. George Jackman.
That's way too long.
I've cut it down.
Yeah, thank you.
John Bowermaster, writer, filmmaker, and adventurer. John is a 6-time grantee of the National Geographic Expeditions Council, one of the Society's ocean heroes. His first assignment for National Geographic magazine was documenting a 3,741-mile crossing of Antarctica by dog sled. He's written 11 books and produced and directed more than 30 documentary films. His National Geographic-sponsored 8 Oceans project took him and his teams around the world by sea kayak over the course of 10 years from '99 to 2008, bringing back stories from the Aleutian Islands to French Polynesia, Gabon, and Tasmania, and more, reporting on how the planet's one ocean and its various coastlines are faring in today's busy world. John lives in New York's Hudson Valley. He's president of One Ocean Media Foundation, chairman of the advisory board of Adventure Science, member of Riverkeeper's Leadership Council. Okay, this is my esteemed panel right here. It's pretty good.
And John moved to Stone Ridge in 1988 and has been coming to the Rosendale Theater as an attendee for all of that time. And I can't, my memory fails, so I can't quite do the math, but we've screened lots of films here at the Rosendale Theater, including, it may have started in 2012 with Dear Governor Cuomo. We showed it at the Woodstock Film Festival. We kind of premiered it there, but I think then we brought it here to the Rosendale Theater next. So we have a long history, a long relationship with the theater. It keeps changing. You guys keep changing. Anyway, it's great to be here.
Great to have you here. Now we're going to do questions from the audience. I have Alan who has a microphone, and if people have a question, raise their hand, and Alan will bring the microphone right around.
Yeah, you might start with questions. I mean, maybe we can go in order. We'll start out with the dam film.
Sure. I have a question for Dr. George. How did you go from being a New York City cop to being a PhD in ecology?
That's a story unto itself, but it's really not much of a transition because I was always advocating for something, and whether you're championing for the poor, or whether it was the stray dogs in the street or stray cats in the street, and everything I saw that I grew up with and was in love with on Long Island, the woods and the water and the fish, they were all disappearing, and I felt I had to do something. And so I started going to school at night, and when I graduated near the end of my retirement, I decided they offered me a scholarship for a PhD, and I said, that's where I'm going.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, we have a question in the back. Go ahead.
Andy here. Is this thing on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to think of another place that was like here, that is a large river, no dams, a large city, then upriver or downriver would be agricultural lands, and I cannot think of another place where they could do this wind shipping?
So I guess the question is there another place on Earth where you could do something similar to what Apollonia is doing?
Well, that's a really good question. I'm kind of surprised myself that the Apollonia is the only sail freight boat operating in the United States. I mean, I'm stunned because it goes back to another film we made called City on the Water. And when you think of New York City, you don't often think of it as being a city on the water, but it is. It's 520 miles of coastline. 4 of the 5 boroughs are islands. I mean, there's water everywhere you look, and I think that's relevant to the Apollonia as well. But usually when we think of water cities, we think of Miami or Boston or even San Francisco, et cetera. But no one in any of those cities is doing what Sam does. To take one step back too, is you guys are all familiar with the Maritime Museum and the Rondout Creek and the docks there, and it's stunning to me that I was just last week in Washington D.C. showing these films to an audience that doesn't live in the Hudson Valley, and they were blown away. At the you can arrive on any kind of given weekend in the Hudson Valley on a summer day, and there's the sloop Clearwater parked at the dock in the Rondout. There's the Apollonia parked at the dock in the Rondout. There's the Solaris, which is the country's only Coast Guard approved all solar boat, again, in the country, all in that one little creek off the Hudson. So we've been kind of forward thinking in regard to the environmental movement overall. I do a fair amount of public speaking, and I pretend all the time that there are more environmental activists per capita in the Hudson Valley than anywhere in the country. I completely make that up. I have absolutely no empirical data to support that at all. It's just a feeling, and I really get that. I mean, I get that in this room. I get that in your reaction to these films, et cetera. So to a certain degree, I'm not surprised that all of this is kind of a first in the Hudson Valley. I think what Sam Merritt, the captain of the Apollonia, would like to see is, a bigger boat, more boats, et cetera. And I think it's coming. I think it has great potential.
I just might piggyback on that, and part of the problem is more than 85% of the world's rivers are dammed, and on top of that, all the great rivers in the world are dammed, and the problem's getting worse in places like Africa, South America, and Asia. And as a matter of fact, what has all that damming done? There was a famous paper, Chow 1995. What it says is, with all the dams in the northern hemisphere, has altered the rotation of planet Earth. And if you don't think dams have an impact, it has altered the rotation of planet Earth. So that's what damming does.
And George, maybe bring us up to speed. What's going on this spring? You're starting to get out there in the field. You got new next projects?
Yeah, we're working on it. I got a bunch of dams queued up. I got a team that's expanding. I got my colleagues over there, Matt and Maddie and Emily, and I'm really proud that we're expanding. The dam removal campaign is expanding, it's moving, it's growing, Riverkeeper's growing, and General Electric is shrinking. So, you know what? And we got a lot of work to do. We're out there sampling in the creeks. We're doing water quality samples. We're showing the comparison of dams, how it impacts water, and the water in the tributaries. We're looking at the biotic potential of these tributaries. We're testing sediments behind dams. We got a lot of work to do, and we said there's 1,600. When I started, there were 900. Then there's 1,200 now, 1,500, 1,600. My estimation is close to 3,000 dams in the Hudson Valley. Wow. Yeah. Most of those go under the radar and nobody knows about. So there's 20,000 culverts, and 60% of those culverts are misaligned. So we have a circulatory problem in the Hudson Valley.
I see another question over here.
Yeah, on the subject of dams, in the film, I think that moved toward the Rondout, and we saw you heading up the Rondout to the dam there, maybe at Eddyville, if I'm not mistaken. What is the potential for that dam's removal, and what are the problematics of identifying a dam like that, which is probably the first one on the Rondout coming out of the Hudson?
Yeah.
And what can we expect about that one and subsequent ones up the Rondout?
You know, that dam, it's difficult unto itself because it's privately owned on both sides, and the owner's rights are sacrosanct. You know, despite what it does, as what Laura Wildman says, to the public trust resources, those owners' rights are sacrosanct, and when that owner, if and when that owner decides to remove that dam, we would gladly assist and facilitate that removal. But until that time comes, you know, maybe we'll just send them Christmas cards and, you know, keep pressuring or, you know, saying this is what we want. And, you know, the public's, this is part of what we're doing. We're out here, now you're getting me to stand up. And we're out here because what we want to do is bring the message. It's really like a mission, you know. We're carrying the message. I call it carrying the gospel. And I got it from my boss, Captain John. He's my spiritual mentor. When I ask him, you know, he's the guy I ask about all the hard decisions. And because he has such knowledge of the valley. And you see him driving the Riverkeeper boat. And you saw him in the film when his eyes well up when he says, we're doing God's work. We really are. And we're restoring, we're on the right side of righteousness. We're bringing the creeks back to being creeks. And in an era of climate change, we need to let the water go where it needs to go. So that's what I would say.
Janet Kern, Environmental Commission in Gardner. And I have a quick question for John, which is about, what about Hoku the dog, who I saw in the credits, but I didn't see in the film? And a longer question for George about dams. So, how's the dog?
Hold on, I get Batu the dog, and George gets the serious question.
Yeah, for now.
Batu is a beautiful golden lab, maybe, what now, 3 or 4 years old?
He's about 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah, he's on the boat at all times. You'll see more of him. We're working on a couple longer films in which Batu features prominently. Yeah.
I can add some information about Batu that Captain John is really proud of. Batu is a purebred Labrador retriever. He just got his lineage back, and it was confirmed. He was adopted. The previous owners didn't want him. They said he was a Labrador mutt mixed with something they didn't know what. And Captain John says, my dog is royalty. So what's your other question, Janet?
George, I wonder if there's any update on what's happening with Tilson Dam, Tilson Lake, and the Pomagot?
No, I don't know anything. All I can tell you is New York State has a dam problem. And part of the problem is they own a lot of high-hazard dams. And in a tough time of economic crisis, almost all of them are in a failing state. So you can't retain a stable of high-hazard dams because you have to maintain strict standards. So I can tell you what I know about that lake and that dam. I've snorkeled that creek from head to top to bottom and all the way down. And I could tell you in the Pomagot Kill, it's magnificent water. There's wild trout, there's fall fish, there's dace, there's creek chubs. It is spectacular. Soon as you hit Tilson Lake, bam, it's murky, filled with algae. The last I remember, the reports say the readings of there's no oxygen in the summer below 10 feet. So this is typical of a dam. Somehow there's getting some eutrophication, nitrogen into that system, and it's causing a bloom and bust system. And then when you go downstream, that water is tea-stained. There's a lot of problems. And you see the scour, and the fish community changes. You go from a cold water fish community to a warm water community downstream. what happens is freshwater, as I mentioned in the film, freshwater dependent creatures are now the most imperiled group of organisms on the planet, bar none. And it's mostly because of dams. And that's how we got into this movement. You know, we started off looking for migratory fishes, but it's all fishes, all fresh. New York, the United States has the highest rate of endemism in freshwater fishes. What does that mean? We have one of the highest diversity of fishes, but we're also experiencing the highest rates of extinction in the world. And that is something that's not acceptable. And we're also losing our freshwater mussels and our freshwater insects like mayflies, stoneflies, caddisflies. It's not acceptable. Millions of years of evolution is crashing to an end for many species. They are dependent on seasonal distribution cycles of water. And when we interfere with that, and we're working on a study right now with our dams. So we're going to come out with a report at some time in the future. And so we're working on it. But I can tell you that dam on Tilson Lake really impacts the water quality there. Thank you.
Yeah, another
On
question?
top of my lack of empirical data regarding that statistic that there are more environmental activists per capita in the Hudson Valley, I think we're at risk too of being a little spoiled, in that we have three really powerful environmental groups working on the Hudson River in Clearwater, Riverkeeper, and Scenic Hudson. Most communities do not. We take it for granted. Most communities do not have that kind of support, and they're all very, very, very different. So, and it then sends me back to George's group, Riverkeeper. You know, the Hudson Riverkeeper, as you guys all know, was the very first of what are now 350 Riverkeeper organizations around the world. So I think sometimes we're at risk of taking that all for granted, but we shouldn't.
And, you know, one of the major battles we're facing right now is they want to put giant storm barriers at the mouth of the Hudson. So if you think small dams are bad, they will try these giant dams 5 miles across Sandy Hook. And the only problem is they don't work. They never factored in sea level rise. So what's the point? You know, we need to come up with a better solution. You know, the Army Corps of Engineers doesn't have a really good track record. You know, when the Air Force needs a new fighter jet, they don't go within the organization to build a fighter jet. They go to the experts. The Army Corps, on the other hand, they come up with their own designs, and we're left with all the levees down in New Orleans and whatever else. I can't really speak on that, but all I can say is all the iconic migratory fish in the Hudson River are in decline. Putting gates on massive dams at the mouth of the Hudson River would be a disaster.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Katie, and I want to say to your point just now, Jack, that's so true about those plans that the Army Corps has down in the harbor and the rest of New York City, and people should look at that. And they're asking for input, but in the input sessions, there's nothing said about the impact on the fish the life in the river. I have a question. I believe that there was an Environmental Bond Act recently, is that right? And I'm wondering if funds from that would go towards dam removal or towards wind-powered transportation. And also I want to know if what individuals can do to help with the dams. Yeah, thanks.
We'll let George speak, but maybe you could also pass it to Scott Cuppett, who's here, who was in the film and works for the DEC, and can maybe talk about the state's future involvement.
Yeah. Well, one thing what I can say is that we have written a letter to the commissioner of DEC to hopefully get some of that money directed towards dam removal. we're not getting federal funding on this infrastructure bill because in the Hudson Valley is really, I would say, as close to a fjord as possible. Not quite. It's really a drowned river valley, more a ria than a fjord, but it's a fjord. So when I said it in the film, half our rivers are dammed, and the other half have natural geomorphic features that prevent migratory fish from moving up. So because we don't get much river mileage on each tributary, and there's so many dams on each trib, and they're so expensive, we're not getting the federal funding. We can't compete with the rivers on the Penobscot, the Kennebec, things like that. So we're stuck right now looking for that bond act to help remove the dams in New York State, and we believe DEC is trying to appropriate the funds. If Scott wants to speak up, that's up to him.
Yeah, we'd love to hear Scott. Alan, can you get the microphone to Scott?
There hasn't been anything released on the bond yet. I certainly think dam removal is an eligible project, but there hasn't been any announcement from the state about the priorities yet. But I would think that dam removal certainly would be a good candidate for projects.
You know, and part of the problem is in climate change, you know, if anybody here has done any long distance running, I used to. My knees are no longer 20-year-old knees. If you ask me to run a marathon, in which I did, I ran quite a few in my life, but now my knees can't handle it. But what we're asking the dams is similar to asking my knees to run a marathon, but worse. Because what we have is failing structures that are undergoing increased stress from climate change. There's an increased frequency of intense precipitation that has gone up by 80% in the past 30 years. Intense rainfall events are increasing in the Northeast due to climate change. So all these dams that are failing, they're on the radar, and something has to be done. There's about 100 in the Hudson Valley that I'm aware of that are high hazard dams.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So thank you so much for everything you do. I'm curious about two things. One of them is you mentioned about owners' rights being sacrosanct, and I'm wondering about eminent domain as a way of having the environment's rights be sacrosanct. I mean, it's a public good to get rid of infrastructure that's harmful. And then the other thing I'm wondering about is the effect of, I drive around a lot and I see these ponds that are formed by dams, and I see all the landscaping around them. And I'm wondering about runoff, from chemicals, and how waterways have reduced ability to deal with that.
Those are fabulous questions. One of the big movements underway in the world, there's a progression. We could start probably one of the most important moments in the history of humans was the Magna Carta. What it did was, it was the fundamental first document that gave people rights. And from that the common people had rights. And there has been a progression of what human rights are. And then I believe in 1973, a guy named Stone wrote a book, Does a Tree Have Standing? And then what is happening underway is something called rights of nature. Yeah. Some people might say that sounds kind of strange, that nature should have rights. Well, whatever God created me, created that tree, created that frog, created that. And I'll tell you what, if if there's no frogs and trees in heaven, I don't want to be there. You know what? I want to be where nature abounds. So if God created me, well, he created everything else. And by the Constitution, it says that God created us. Well, then, he created everything. And rivers have rights because they are fountains of life. And there is a movement underway. The Wanganui River in New Zealand was given personhood. The Ganges River was given personhood. Does that sound strange? No, it does not, because in this country, corporations have personhood. So if corporations have personhood, so should every river have rights. And there's a fundamental movement underway. You know, if you look at that picture of Iwo Jima, the battle, and Mount Suribachi, the first guy in that line holding that American flag, Johnny Cash sang about him, Ira Hayes. Sang this song, Ira Hayes. Ira Hayes was a Native American from the Pima tribe. At the time, he's raising a flag on Mount Suribachi. He was disenfranchised. He did not have the right to vote, but he had the right to fight for his country. So we need to get that fund. There is a movement that we're embracing, and that is rights of nature.
Yes, go ahead over here.
Yeah,
You'll be next.
you can see why my job is so easy. I look for charismatic characters like George, like Sam Merritt, the captain of the Apollonia, and I just stand back.
Just a quick question. What makes a dam a high hazard dam? And then the second part of that is back to those owners that you were talking about. Why wouldn't they want to take the dam down? Is there like potential flooding, or will it change, what will change for them?
Well, what makes a dam high hazard is if that dam were to breach, first of all, we start with categorically, all dams are temporary. They're human-made structures. They are temporary. So if they're high hazard, it means there's a serious risk of life in danger, or life and property downstream being endangered. So the first problem with a dam is liability. Dams are not an investment, they're a liability. And if you own a high hazard dam, with today's construction costs, it costs a fortune to maintain. And in my opinion, there's a burden knowing that you're altering a historic waterway. And people tell me, oh, well, that's historic. Well, we got Native Americans on our board of directors. Let's ask them what they consider historic. Let's ask, there is nothing more historic than the fish that live in those rivers. There is nothing more historic than the geology, the geomorphology. We're looking at Eurocentric snapshots in time when we call that Colonel Mustard's dam is historic. That means nothing to me. So, and the second part of your question was?
Well, I'm just saying, like, why wouldn't they want to take the dam down? Like,
I
what's
think they're
stopping
living
them?
in Norman Rockwell times. They think everybody's skating on them. Nobody skates on dams anymore. I don't know why, to be quite honest. As an environmentalist, the more I learn about dams, the more I learn about rivers, the more I learn about water, I would never want one. And because when I know, to me, one of the saddest things in the world, I remember reading about Martha, the last passenger pigeon on planet Earth. In 1916, she died in the Cincinnati Zoo at 27 years old. The last one before that was killed by some boy in Ohio. To know that that was the last creature, when that creature went extinct, so did millions of years of genetic lineage. Extinction is forever, and dams are leading to the extinction of freshwater organisms, and it is one of the leading causes. And our freshwater mussels, We're trying to deploy and oyster reefs and reef balls in the lower part of the estuary, because each oyster filters 50 gallons of water. But in freshwater mussels filter 25 gallons apiece. We need those creatures. We need our ecosystems. This is not an act of altruism to save nature. It is a fundamental act of self-preservation for humans.
So I'm curious how much it would cost to remove all the dams, and if you were to get like full funding to do that, how long would it take?
More than my lifetime. But the problem is, we're moving. I got a string of owner consents, and I'm building more. My team and I, I'm so proud of Riverkeeper. I'm so proud of the people I work with. I'm proud of the DEC. They're great stewards of the environment. We're working as hard as we can. Part of the problem Laura Wildman mentioned in that film, and I said it, these are the ghosts of capitalism past. They made their fortunes and they walked away, and they left us, the people, the public, we the people, have to pay for their dams, but they keep the money.
But George, can you be really specific in a short example? I mean, that taking down the dam on the Quasay Creek or the First Brook, well, what was the cost? Ballpark to bring those guys.
First of all, that was pre-COVID. When
Right.
we add post-COVID right now, every dam is like every house in the Hudson Valley. I'm just guessing $1 million for every dam, for the small dams. So when we add up all the high hazards and all them, you're talking billions of dollars.
So this year, because I'm jumping ahead, but you have approval to take, or not approval, but you have a consent basically to take down a dozen dams.
I have about a dozen
But you
owner
need funding,
consents.
you need money.
We are backed up like a Russian convoy. We don't have, what we have is, I got when I started this job, getting owner consent was really the problem. And now convincing owners to relinquish their dams is less of a problem now. We've almost made it something that we enjoy doing, that owners are helping us. But now obtaining funding to remove these dams is now a problem. And so we're constantly hustling grants to get those dams. But the owners are happy because behind those dams, remember, the largest Superfund site in the United States is here in the Hudson Valley. And that's because of what was behind the dam. So we don't want them coming out in one big kinetic burst. We want them coming out in a controlled fashion with that toxic legacy removed, and then allowing that water to free. The biggest problem with dams can be the sediment. What do we do with all that toxic sediment? So sediment mitigation adds to the cost of these dams.
Yeah, I have a question in the back. Yep.
Hi, what is the difference between these dams and beaver dams?
Just about everything. Beaver dams are porous. Eels can climb through them. And busy as a beaver, well, beavers do not build dams made out of steel reinforced concrete. And so that's the biggest difference right off the bat. And the problem with that is steel reinforced concrete does not blow out nearly as often. For every intense rain event, those dams blow out. And then it creates connectivity. There's connectivity and porous movement through that dam. It's made of sticks and mud. It's kind of like the three wolves or the three pigs, or the three little pigs. You can huff and puff and blow the house down, but not on a brick and stone, and that's the difference. It's the construction materials. And beavers aren't building dams 500 feet high. So what's the difference? Just about everything in the world.
Hi.
Yeah.
So I have a question about both movies. Besides the owner permissions and the funding, are there other legal considerations that are barriers to removing? And similarly, are there legal issues that are barriers for wind shipping, either on the Hudson or just in general?
You want to talk about the wind shipping?
I mean,
Yeah, well, I mean,
sea shipping versus on a smaller level than container ships.
right. Well, I can break it down a little more locally, if that's okay. I mean, one of the hardest parts of the Apollonia building up its business, so to speak, is finding ports that can accept docking. The Hudson River has become so kind of inaccessible, the docks have become so inaccessible that it's taken Sam, literally years to come to agreement just to be able to pull in, tie up, and unload, because we've become so unused to that. The Scenic Hudson very generously and with all best intents built a beautiful park in Beacon called the Long Dock Park. Right? The Long Dock Park. And when Sam went there and appealed to tie up to it, they said, "Oh, you can't tie up to the Long Dock Park. It's a park. It's not a dock." And so it took him a while to kind of work with them and collaborate on the best way to do that. Now they do that. So that's his biggest headache, actually, is finding places that can receive him. But the beautiful part, and how many of you have seen the Apollonia on the river? Some? A few? I mean, we've gotten used to seeing the Clearwater going up and down the river over 50-odd years. But the Apollonia is now, every month, May to October, doing these runs up and down the river. And when they arrive at port, just like the Clearwater, people come down to the river. They want to see the boat, they have questions, what the hell is this, what are you guys doing, who are you, etc., which is hugely important because we want to encourage people to come down and familiarize themselves and have an appreciation for and a connection with the river. Even as I say that, I want to take it back because we're at a time where sea level is rising inevitably, and we're trying to encourage people not to build on the river, or if you to build on the river, to do it very, very intently. So it's a kind of interesting time for the Apollonia to be moving up and down. I showed the film in D.C. last week. A guy came up to me afterwards. He works for the World Bank. He works on marine transport issues. And the World Bank is looking into not sales so much, but how do we provide transportation that is less expensive, and that's become a concern for everybody. I think that's Sam's biggest point in that story is how do we how do we calculate in, how do we figure in the cost of transportation? I mean, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I'm sure all of us are occasional users of Amazon. No? Never? Okay. It was funny. I drove back from D.C., and it was a super rainy day on Saturday, and every other vehicle that passed me was either an Amazon van or an Amazon semi-truck. Wow. Yeah, so it's a lot of, obviously Sam and the Apollonia are not trying to compete with that wholeheartedly, but, he has a great vision. I like his kind of quixotic / charismatic approach to making change, because now is the time where we have to make change.
She had a second part about legal issues?
Go ahead.
So she had, somebody asked a question about the legal issues associated with dam removal. There are a lot, and we have to get through permitting and all those process, but we also have to engage the communities because stakeholders have a say. And we were removing a dam in Westchester, and the historical, sometimes I call them the hysterical society. The historical society, I was teaching a class at Queens College at the time, and a guy calls me up, and I stepped out of class because I didn't recognize the number, and he said, we're gonna resist your dam removal and on something fundamental principle of whatever. And he said, those dams are historic. And I said, Jesus Christ, so is slavery, but we don't want that back, do we? And so just because something is historic doesn't necessarily mean it's good. And, you know, and what is your perception of historic? So there are lots of legal issues. And again, it's the contaminants behind the dam that we have to take care of. But so the outcome of this was, if you guys give us a presentation to our board of directors, then we'll decide what we're going to do. So what he said was, after the film, and he sent me an email, your information was extremely compelling. We relinquish our right to resist your dam removal. And that's what we're out here trying to do. We're trying to pass the message. Dam removal is mainstream. At the UN Water Week last week, they talked about dam removal worldwide is one of the fastest growing campaigns around the world. So even at the UN level, they're discussing dam removal. So
That's great. Another question up there. Yeah, go ahead.
But one thing that I'm very concerned about, when I hear how much it costs to remove the dams and how much damage they've done, I'm very concerned about new dams being built. And right now, the Hudson River is being jeopardized by Champlain Hudson Power Express, Chippy. And if you trace Chippy back to its source, it's Hydro-Quebec. And Hydro-Quebec wants to create a mega dam, okay, flooding indigenous property, killing forestry, animals, marine life, as you say. And that is going to be the beginning of a power line that they want to rip open the Hudson River over 200 miles. You're talking about sediment. We're at a Superfund site, okay? So all the PCBs are going to be, okay? My question is it possible for our advocacy groups to really pay attention to this issue and stop megadams, as well as, you know, let's put a moratorium on Champlain Hudson.
You know what I would like to say, I'm really proud of Riverkeeper. Thank you, thank you. And Chippy is a serious threat, and we're very worried about it. And what we're also worried about is they're making the Hudson River an electric cord. And nobody really understands what are the impacts of electromagnetic fields to the fish that navigate by the Earth's geomagnetic fields. Fish use these geomagnetic fields to migrate. Birds use these same fields to migrate. Just because we don't see them and can't understand them doesn't mean they don't exist. So what happens when you make an electromagnet with fish like sturgeon, both of which, we have 2 species in the Hudson, both of which are endangered. They have this organ called an ampullae of Lorenzini. They're highly sensitive to electromagnetic fields. Hutchinson et al. 2020 wrote a paper. They were testing elasmobranchs. It was a first cousin to the sturgeon. They start foraging in the presence of EMF, but there's nothing to forage for. So they're expending calories, and they're getting nothing in return. What will it do to our shad, our striped bass, our river herring, our sturgeon, and our crabs that are all used crabs for some reason become mesmerized by electromagnetic fields. We are vehemently fighting and opposing. I have been in communication with these tribes up in the First Nations people up in Canada, Hydro-Quebec is seizing 1 million acres of their land. And if you think hydropower is clean or green, it's not. There's nothing clean or green about hydropower. Anybody that is looking to profit from a river, they'll sell you anything. But there's a lot of methane and carbon that's being released and then aerosolized and degassed due to pressure changes. It is not clean or green. So we're fighting, and I hope everybody rallies with us to prevent Chippy from coming down the Hudson, because there's another cable that's planning to come down here too. So we're talking about that one paper, 330 megawatts of power. This would be 2,500 megawatts of power down the Hudson River. And you know what? I was on one of these webinars, and they said it's safe. These things are safe because there's bedrock. I said, it's so safe, would you put your babies on that cable? But you're asking the fish to do the same thing. So we know it also interferes with the ontogeny, the development of these fish. Some of them in strong magnetic fields, it interferes with their natural development from the egg and larval stages. So we are very concerned about that.
I've got a question for John. If I followed the film correctly, WINDSHIPPED, you actually started filming in 2015. Can you talk about what it's like to make such a long commitment to a film? I mean, and how you deal with funders doing something like that?
Yeah, that's a slight misread. They provided us with some archival footage that was shot in 2015, but we did not shoot that. No, my relationship with the Apollonia Project goes back to 2013 when I met Sam, and he just described his vision. He said, I want to reintroduce sail freight to the Hudson River. And journalistically, I just thought, well, that's a great story. Plus, he's such, as you saw in the film, he's such a charismatic character. If anyone could sell this idea, he was going to be able to do it. So we just stayed in touch. We talked all the time. But that footage that you saw from 2015 was shot by, he had a business partner at the time named Jason Marlowe, and Jason was actually a pretty good camera operator, so we used that footage. Now, we started filming with him in May of 2020, which was, height of the pandemic. That's why all the bank robber, paraphernalia. And then filmed in 2020, which is the first season, 2021, a little bit in the second season, 2022 last year, just to finish it up. Documentaries are supposed to present kind of real life, but we missed the arrival in New York City the first year. So we thought, well, that's on our list. We got to get that. So we did it once, we did it twice, we did it 3 times, and what you see is kind of the best of. In regard to the kind of funding of these things, I have a 501c3. I raise money from individuals, foundations, etc. That's how we pay for these things. I've had the good fortune to travel literally around the world. We've made films on every continent, including 2 in Antarctica and the first 3D movie in Antarctica. But about 8 years ago, I realized that it wasn't like a lightning bolt, but it just dawned on me that I knew small towns. I knew the back roads in small towns in Chile better than I knew the back roads in my small town in Ulster County. And I thought, well, you don't have to travel halfway around the world to find good stories. You don't have to travel halfway around the world to find good environmental stories at all. They're right here in our backyard. So since 2015, we've made more than 20 films looking at, we started out with a series called The Hudson River at Risk, and we looked at all the environmental issues, many of which George has mentioned, PCBs in the river and leaky nuclear power plant and pipelines kind of going everywhere. And I took those around the state and showed them, and I got bummed out. I thought, we live in this beautiful place, but all I'm doing is kind of emphasizing the problems. So we made kind of a purposeful pivot and started making films that were more optimistic, more hopeful, more positive. And that series now, including the Apollonia, I think is up into 12 different films. Believe it or not, you can binge them on Amazon Prime. Just search Hope on the Hudson. I think there's literally 9 films on Amazon Prime. People in Germany and Australia are watching our efforts here, and that's been quite rewarding, actually. And now I feel like, but like you guys, even though I've been here in the Hudson Valley for 35 years, I still find new roads almost every day that I'd never seen before. I get lost all the time, which I like. So it's been, quite rewarding to get to know our backyard better and the people in our backyard better, and I'm constantly amazed by the kind of high level of character that we meet and who are our neighbors.
I had a question for George regarding the sediment and the algae. How long does it take, even with your careful removal of a dam, for that sediment to filter out and not affect the fish and the wildlife?
It's an interesting question. They're all interesting, but in medical terms, if somebody had a wound that had an abscess or something, you would have to debride that wound. So there's going to be a short-term impact, and then you cleanse it, and then the wound heals. What we're seeing is there's a very short turbidity period, and we remove some of the sediment, and then we let some passively flow downstream.
But George, we saw in the film the example of that Maiden Lane Dam, which was how tall, like 20 feet?
25 feet.
25 feet, which you have now approval to take down.
Yes, that dam is coming down. That large dam is coming down.
So
this
what
September.
will be the process? How do you, in regard to sediment and taking the thing down?
That's going to be a long, slow process. There's a lot of impounded sediment behind that, because Lunar Leupold, his father wrote a Sand County Almanac, which should be required reading for everybody. But Lunar Leupold said, rivers are the gutters down which run the continents. And what it means is all that sediment is being transferred. You build a dam, it backs up, and it stays behind that. So what we're seeing is we had a dam that breached. Nature abhors a vacuum. And within 6 months, it was turning into a green field. Then what we do is, after that channel stabilizes those sediment banks, the whole thing doesn't come down. Just basically the sediment, the channel will transport the sediment. So what we do is, with the Trees for Trib program, we come in and plant trees along that floodplain, and to help stabilize those sediments. In that one situation, we planted 400 trees. What we have is a wildlife sanctuary. It looks magnificent. And so it's a short wound. And even on the Elwha Dam, when they removed that, they saw that there was a small impact. But what they saw was the results were just overwhelmingly positive. Not only that, what we're seeing is we're accreting land. When the course on Furnace Brook, there was like this back eddy. It starts to fill in those back eddies. The river heals itself, and not only are we restoring the river's building up, giving us back more land, and that's riparian corridor. Riparian corridors are extremely important for wildlife. So, go ahead. Well, what we're trying to do is to stabilize those sediments so they don't get washed away. The grasses come in first. There's a succession. So we talk about, Eugene Odom wrote this beautiful paper or book called Succession. It's almost like, I always think of Fiddler on the Roof, Succession, and, but And what it shows, what you get is a succession of plants that are best adapted. Some like their feet wet, some don't. And so we plant the trees that would do well, plants that like their feet wet. And so then they start to spread their roots out and stabilize those soils. And I'm telling you, it's magnificent.
All right, folks, we'll do a couple more questions. Yeah.
Yep. We've heard about the impediments to dam removal with private ownership and things like that. Could we speak a little bit, or you speak a little bit about culverts? And you mentioned that 60% of our culverts are misaligned. So it's a little bit more approachable, possibly. I know there are some efforts that the county is about right now in identifying culverts that could be addressed. Tell us a little bit about the significance, the opportunities, and what programs are going on locally that we can look to for optimistic stories about fish passage and aquatic
Well,
passage.
it's not just fish passage. Right now is migration season for the amphibians, all the little frogs, the peepers, the spring peepers, all the salamanders that need that, and turtles that need that connectivity. And what happens with most of these culverts is they become perched. So they're basically a tunnel, and the water flows through that, and then the constant scour of water coming out of that creates what's called a scour pool. And then creating that scour pool, now the stream is no longer in alignment with that tube. Going forward, we're trying to measure these. There's a NAC system. We're out there creating a database of all these culverts and trying to get the local counties and the towns and all these highway groups, when they repair a culvert, what we'd like to see is not so much these tubes. We want to see arches. The arches can be in many ways better because they don't perch. And so if we can get that movement growing, we don't want to see the pipes unless they're bedded properly. We would like to see, Newburgh did a really good job on the whole Quasay Creek. What they had was some really steep perched culverts. What they did was create a beautiful arch system over it. So it creates like a bridge. You never have to worry about a scour pool, and there's always connectivity. It's all about the connectivity. So we got to talk to our elected officials.
All right, folks, I want to thank our panel here. George, that was beautiful. Thank you. John, thank you. Appreciate it. Well done all around. And folks, thank you for coming out. We really appreciate it.